بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا، وزدنا من فضلك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا، وزدنا من فضلك حكمة وتعليما خالصا لوجهك موفقا. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. So we're starting with a course as a general guide that will cover the text called Essentials of Quranic Arabic by Masood Ranginwala. I believe that's how his name is pronounced. So the idea here is that we're not going to cover any part of the text today. We're just going to go over some general issues related to the course. So this is my first time using Zoom. This is my first time teaching this text. If you have any recommendations, then please let me know what they are. Now, we're going to talk, inshallah, about 4 basic areas. 1 is about learning Arabic. 2 is about this course. 3 is about the instructor. And 4 is about you. So those are the general things that we're going to cover today, inshallah. These classes will get started at 9 a.m. Amman time. So now, regarding learning Arabic, this course is about learning Arabic grammar. And by grammar, I mean both syntax or nahu and morphology or sarf. So it's about learning the technicalities of the Arabic language. For example, you're in a position where you cannot read a page of general purpose Arabic, say Al Jazeera in Arabic, or whatever other general purpose topic or a novel or what have you. If you cannot read a page of general purpose Arabic, you can still take this course. That's fine. You will benefit, as this is a course for beginners to intermediate. We will get into some topics, inshallah, that will allow you to progress. At the end of this course, you should be able to read Qatr al-Nada, inshallah. So the idea is that this course is about grammar. It's not about Arabic language acquisition. And if you can't read a page of general purpose Arabic, then you don't need to learn grammar only, but rather you need to acquire the language. You need to work on language acquisition. And so this course is one part of your study of Arabic. If you need to work on your Arabic language acquisition, then this course will not be sufficient, but it will be one portion of that. Now, the author of this text suggests studying a book called 80% of Quranic Vocabulary. So please get yourself a copy of that, do that. We won't cover that in class, but you can ask questions. Now, I just want to get some technicalities out of the way. Please don't ask illegal questions or post illegal links, such as asking questions about acquiring books in a way that violates copyright laws or sharing links to illegal copies of texts. So I just wanted to preempt anyone saying, oh, where can I get a copy of it, and someone else posting an illegal copy of it. So the name of the text is 80% of Quranic Vocabulary. Try to get your hands on it. In any case, you cannot learn a language by merely learning grammar. You must acquire a decent vocabulary, and you must be able to understand how ideas are expressed in that language. And so Arabic is not English just coded in a different way. It's actually a completely different language. And so acquiring a decent vocabulary is the first step. But beyond that, one also has to understand how one would even put words together to form the same idea in Arabic that one wanted to convey in English. And what you'll find is that Arabic is significantly different than English in the way that sentences are formed. And so language acquisition is not just about learning grammar and vocabulary, but also just how the language works. And the only way you can really get that is by reading and by listening. If you think that this course or any particular course will allow you to learn Arabic, then you've misunderstood the point of courses and the point of instructors. You have to drive yourself and find something, whether it's a children's book or you can ask other students of Arabic what to read on your own. Pursue the reading of Arabic texts and the listening to Arabic so that you can actually acquire, so that you can work on your language acquisition. So no course and no instructor will give you that. You have to do that on your own. So just skipping a little bit ahead to about the instructor, questions like how does this course compare to, for example, Qasid Level 3 or Al-Kitab or the Medina Studies or what have you, I don't know, because I don't usually teach Arabic language acquisition or Arabic from the perspective of Arabic language acquisition. I teach specific subjects like grammar or prosody, but not Arabic language acquisition. So unfortunately, I can't answer questions like how does this course compare to other courses of study. So the idea here, though, is that this course, inshallah, coming out of it, you will have a strong mastery, bi'idhnillah, of the core fundamentals of how grammar works. Will that allow you to understand Arabic? No, not in its entirety. You have to work on Arabic language acquisition. Now, what is your goal in studying Arabic? If your goal is to understand some simple texts, then that's all well and good. But if your goal is actually to understand the Quran and Sunnah, then you actually have to make a point of reading more and understanding more than just the Quran and Sunnah. Let me explain. Imagine that there was a person, let's say someone that grew up in a country where the language spoken there isn't English. So let's say someone grew up in Beijing speaking Mandarin, knowing only Mandarin and not knowing any English. Then that person as an adult decided that he wanted to really understand Shakespeare. Now, if that person only ever studied Shakespeare and nothing else in English, I think that we'd all agree that their mastery of Shakespeare would be less than someone who studied Shakespeare as well as English in general and English literature in general. And so the idea is that it's not sufficient if you really want to understand the Quran at a deeper level and you really want to understand the hadith literature at a deeper level, then you have to understand Arabic in the context that it was spoken during that era. And as a result, because of this, what you find is that when Muslims preserved the Arabic language, they didn't just preserve the Quran and the Sunnah and the statements of the Sahaba, but rather they also preserved pre-Islamic and early Islamic literature. Because by doing so, they preserved the Arabic language and the context of it. And if we want to be, not terribly accurate, but just make a general observation, the role that hadith plays in fiqh is similar to the role that pre-Islamic and early Islamic poetry plays in tafsir. And so understanding the context of the Arabic language and how it was used in the pre-Islamic era and the early Islamic era is necessary for actually understanding the Quran, the Sunnah. And it's interesting, if you look at, for example, Imam Shafi'i, some of his fiqh positions, in arguing them, he quotes pre-Islamic poetry because his point was to prove the meaning of a particular word that appeared in a hadith, and the context was clear from a line of pre-Islamic poetry. And so this shows you the importance of learning beyond the Quran and Sunnah if you really want to understand the Quran and Sunnah. Just a little bit more about Arabic and about other languages. So the natural tendency for languages is actually to change, not to stay the same. And what you find with Arabic, and to a far lesser extent Hebrew, is that these languages were preserved because they are the languages of sacred texts. And so in the case of Arabic, it has been artificially preserved. And by artificially, I don't mean that's a negative thing. I mean that the natural tendency of any language is that it will not stay the same. You find that if you look at any language that's 1,500 years old, you find that people no longer speak it today the way that they spoke it 1,500 years ago, if at all. For example, what one finds is in English, if you look into Old English, which was spoken around, we could say it started forming around the time around 600 Christian era. So if you look at Old English, it was Anglo-Saxon. It was a completely different language than the English that we speak today. And if you look at Middle English, which is the English of Chaucer, it's actually still a different set of languages. It didn't have a fixed standard. And as odd as it may seem to some people, Shakespeare is actually modern English. His English is not contemporary English, but it is modern English. It's not Middle English or Old English. So English has changed quite a bit. And that is actually the tendency in most languages, is to change over time. And that's the natural tendency. In the case of Arabic, what happened is that Arabic, basically, you can look at Arabic as consisting of two phases. So there's something called being prescriptive and being descriptive. Descriptive linguistics is when linguists study a language and they accept it as it is. They observe and they take notes and they scratch their heads and they come up with descriptions and explanations, but they are observers. They are not saying what should and shouldn't be used, or how that language should or shouldn't be spoken or written. That's what descriptive linguistics is about. Prescriptive linguistics, on the other hand, is when you say, well, actually, this is the correct way to speak. So, for example, prescriptive linguistics, if I wanted to take a prescriptive approach to grammar, I'd say that me want orange juice is wrong. If I were to take a descriptive view of it, I'd say me want orange juice is how this particular segment of society indicates that they want orange juice. And so the descriptive approach is to observe and take note. The prescriptive approach is to say, this is right and that is wrong. So in Arabic, what you have is you have this period of time called Asr al-Ihtijaj. Asr al-Ihtijaj, which I like to translate roughly as the authoritative era. So this is a period of time where the language of revelation, the language of the Quran and the Sunnah, was spoken as people's normal language. So it applies to both space and time. So the space that we're talking about is certain parts of the Arabian Peninsula. As for the Arabs that were in the Levant in Syria, and the Arabs of Iraq, and even many of the Arabs of Yemen, their dialects were considered to not be the Arabic, the Fusha Arabic, for multiple reasons. Occasionally, the language was just too strange and was just too different, such as in some of the Yemeni dialects. In other cases, it had words from other languages mixed in, like the Arabs of Iraq or the Arabs of the Levant. Also, Christian Arabs would often mix Aramaic in with their own speech. So there's a certain set of restrictions in terms of which tribes and which people Arabic was accepted from, and also which areas. And then the span of time was approximately, if one were to be as expansive as possible, 150 years before Hijrah to 150 years after Hijrah. And there are differences of opinion. So some scholars, for example, will say that 150 years after Hijrah, people were still speaking Arabic in cities, but up to 300 Hijri, people were still speaking it in the Badia, among the Bedouins of the desert. You'll have differences of opinion among the different early Arabic linguists as to what was exactly considered an authority. But regardless of the specific details, there's this concept of something being a hujjah, of something being an authority, something that can be cited as proof. And so, in general, anyone who's after 200 Hijri is not an authority, and their language needs to be measured against the language of people prior to that era. And so the idea here is that classical Arabists looked at Arabic from 150 Hijri and earlier with a descriptive lens. They observed, they said, this is how Arabs spoke when people spoke Arabic. And so however they spoke, as long as it wasn't considered an error, or a weakness in expression, however they spoke is how Arabic works. And then they reverse engineered that and came up with the rules of Arabic grammar, and there began the prescriptive phase. That this is how Arabs spoke prior to 150 Hijri, and so this is the correct way of speaking it. Anything that conflicts with that is not Fusha. Moving forward, I'll just mention a couple more points. The cool thing about Arabic and Arabic not changing is that Arabic is essentially its own Latin, if that makes sense. And so whenever you look up an English scientific word, you'll find that it's either originally Latin or Greek or Latin through Greek most of the time. And so a lot of the academic words of English are very complex, and you have to be a bit of a language nerd to understand what these words mean. And so in Arabic, that's not the case because Arabic maintains its ancient roots. And so something like philology in English, which doesn't make any sense to anyone who doesn't know what that specific word means, in Arabic would be fiqh al-lugha. And something like, for example, the study of sound in English be called acoustics, whereas in Arabic it would be called sawtiyat. And so the point is that because Arabic is an ancient language, it also means that the academic words are actually easier because they are Arabic. And a final thing that I'm just going to say about Arabic is that Arabic is unlike modern English because Arabic is highly inflected. What does inflected mean? It means that words change in Arabic. They change depending on their grammatical rule. You have a bit of that in English. So in English, an example of inflection is I love ice cream, but Bob loves me. So I love ice cream. Here, I is the form of the personal pronoun, but there's a different inflection of it, which is me when it's the object form. So in English, that applies to pronouns and a handful of other words, but it doesn't apply in general. In Arabic, that idea of inflection applies to most words. So most words will change depending on whether they're a subject, an object, depending on the mood of the verb, and other factors. So Arabic is a highly inflected language, and that actually makes its grammar a little bit more detailed than you may be used to, but it makes it quite easy to master once one focuses on a handful of rules and really learns to apply them. About this course, inshallah, we'll mostly be covering the text. Sometimes we'll digress when doing so is in the general interest of learning Arabic. And as I mentioned, please don't ask me how this compares to other courses because I don't know. About the instructor. So my name is Mustafa Al-Qabbani. I grew up in Canada. English is my first language. I've lived in Amman since 2006. I'm a computer programmer and a translator. And I guess the connection is that it all has to do with language, whether artificial or human, and how language is used to express ideas. I have 5 translations that have been published, alhamdulillah. I'm not a religious figure, so please don't call me sheikh or anything else that indicates some sort of religious significance or knowledge. I can teach you some things, inshallah, about Arabic, but I don't know much about Arabic teaching programs, so please don't ask me about them. One thing I want to just mention really quickly. So I grew up in Canada, and I had always had this passion for learning Arabic and for mastering Arabic. And I remember in high school mentioning to a colleague of mine that there's one thing that I would never be able to do. It was just too difficult. And that was composing classical Arabic poetry. And it was just something that seemed so strange. It was like, telling me that I could write a Chinese novel or something like that. It was just too different and too difficult. And alhamdulillah, a few years ago, I actually won a 3rd place in a competition here in Amman, Jordan, for a classical Arabic poem that I had composed. And so my point is that a lot of things that you might imagine that you would never be able to master, over the years, if you really apply yourself outside of the classroom and not just, we took this text and so I'm going to study this text and that's it. No, you have to actually apply yourself outside of the classroom. And so it's like an 80-20 rule. 20% is my effort and 80% is your effort. So what I ask of you is that you think deeply about everything and you fall in love with the Arabic language. And if you're not dreaming about Arabic and not dreaming about Arabic grammar and not like fretting over it, you haven't fallen in love with Arabic yet. And so we all probably know this anecdotal story where this man came and asked the Sheikh, how can I dream about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And so the Shaykh told him, well, what you do is eat some salty food and go to sleep without drinking any water. And so the man did that, and he went back to the Shaykh. And the Shaykh said, did you dream? He said, yeah. He said, what did you dream about? He said, well, I dreamt that I was drinking a lot of water. And so the man said, well, when your longing for the Prophet ﷺ is the same as your longing for water, then you will dream about the Prophet ﷺ. And so the idea here is that I want you to obsess over Arabic. And that's how you'll benefit from this course. And there will be a lot of detail here. But if you don't go about reading on your own and applying what you know on your own and trying to apply it everywhere where you see Arabic and in the Quran, when you're reading your page of Quran, then you won't really benefit. So please do that. Don't wait for things to be spoon-fed to you. When you ask questions, I will often point you to how to research your own answer, and I expect you to get back to me. So about you is that you need to apply yourself, and you need to be prepared to research your own answers and get back to me and indicate that you've understood, or where I can give you some more feedback on some things that you missed. Okay, we will stop here. هذا وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والله تعالى أعلم وأحكم وهو حسبنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم.